Have you ever wondered where tarot cards actually come from? You're not alone. The tarot's past is as rich and mysterious as the cards themselves. In modern times, we think of tarot decks as tools for fortune-telling or self-reflection, but their story begins in a much more down-to-earth setting. It turns out tarot cards weren't invented by ancient wizards or gypsy mystics, but by Renaissance nobles looking for a fun card game. But this also depends on the source you read, because some say were invented by Egyptians. Anyway, over the centuries, this game deck transformed into a book of wisdom loved by occultists and spiritual seekers. Today, we'll look at the history of the tarot, from its surprising beginnings in Italian palaces through its occult rebirth in 18th century France to the worldwide phenomenon it is now. So settle in, maybe grab a cup of tea, and let's dive into the history of the tarot. It might blow your mind to learn that tarot cards started out purely as a card game. For this, we travel back to 15th century northern Italy, a time of splendid courts and rich patron families. Imagine a grand banquet hall in Milan or Florence around the 1440s. Nobles in silks and brocades are gathered around a table, laughing and playing a trick-taking card game called Trionfi, which is in Italian for triumphs. In their hands are beautiful hand-painted cards, some showing ordinary suits like cups and swords, others depicting allegorical figures, a glittering star, a proud emperor, virtues like strength and justice, even a skeletal figure of death. These were the first tarot decks, known then as Trionfi cards. They were lavish creations commissioned by aristocrats, often painted with gold leaf by master artists, and were used for entertainment rather than divination. In fact, the oldest surviving tarot cards, the Visconti Sforza deck from the mid-15th century, were made for the Duke of Milan's family around 1450 and are stunning works of Renaissance art. In those days, tarot cards had a full set of 4 suits, much like modern playing cards, plus a special 5th suit of picture cards called trumps. The trump cards, what we now call the major arcana, formed a sort of allegorical parade. They featured figures and concepts reflecting the medieval worldview. There were emperors and popes, virtues like temperance, cosmic bodies like the sun and moon, and grand ideas like the wheel of fortune and the world. Think of it as a visual hierarchy of life's forces, from the lowly fool at 0 to the highest spiritual triumph. These images weren't originally about magic. They likely had moral or didactic undertones, aligned with the era's love of allegory. In fact, early records suggest that tarot trumps were sometimes used to spark philosophical discussions on the soul's journey or as prompts for poetry contests. Learned nobles might deal out a few trumps and compose witty verses about them, a pastime called tarocchi appropriati, long before anyone shuffled the cards to predict the future. By around 1500, the game of triumphs had really caught on. The Italian term tarocchi came into use, origin of the word tarot, though its exact meaning is still debated. French soldiers invading Italy apparently found the game irresistible and carried it back home, where tarocchi became tarot in French. Over the next couple of centuries, tarot card playing spread to various parts of Europe. In France and Switzerland, the Tarot de Marseille style deck became a standard. People mainly played tarot as a gambling or trick-taking game, much like bridge or spades. Was anyone using tarot cards for fortune-telling back then? It's hard to know for sure. Ordinary playing cards had been used for simple divination since at least the 16th century, and there are hints that tarot decks may have occasionally been dealt out in a playful attempt to read someone's fate. Some historians speculate there might have been informal cartomancy games using tarot and even dice in the 16th to 17th centuries. But crucially, there's no solid evidence of tarot being viewed as a mystical prophetic tool until the late 18th century. It's fascinating if you think about it. Those early card players had no idea that their tarocchi game, enjoyed over wine and jest in a Renaissance court, would one day be seen as a key to the universe's secrets. They were just having fun with a cool new deck of cards. If we freeze frame history around 1700, tarot cards were still just an old card game that some people gambled on in Italian and French taverns. That was about to change dramatically, thanks to a few imaginative minds in the Age of Enlightenment. The big plot twist in tarot's history arrived in 1781, when a Protestant clergyman turned polymath named Antoine Cour de Gébelin published an essay that reimagined the tarot as something mystical. You see, Cour de Gébelin was at a fashionable Parisian salon, a card party, when he first laid eyes on a deck of tarot cards. The story goes that the hostess had brought them from abroad, and they were a novelty in Paris. As he watched the game, de Gébelin had a flash of inspiration. He became convinced that this card game from Italy was far more than a game. In his learned eyes, those trumps depicting a juggler, emperors, and the sun looked like survivors of ancient Egyptian wisdom in disguise. De Gébelin hurried to include his theories in his massive scholarly work, Le Monde Primitif. He wrote with absolute confidence that the tarot's 22 trumps were secret arcana of the Egyptians, smuggled into Europe and Christianized over time. For example, he asserted the tarot's Papes card was actually the Egyptian goddess Isis in veiled form. Bear in mind, this was pure speculation. De Gébelin had no historical evidence whatsoever. In fact, when he wrote this, Egyptian hieroglyphs hadn't even been decoded yet. But de Gébelin was a persuasive writer, living in a time fascinated by all things ancient and mystical. His elaborate theory sounded plausible to his readers. In that same 1781 volume, another contributor, the Comte de Melay, came in with additional bold ideas. De Melay agreed that tarot was Egyptian and went on to claim it was actually the fabled Book of Thoth from Egyptian legend. He was the first to explicitly propose that tarot cards be used for cartomancy, even outlining a method to do so. He also drew an analogy that would become fundamental in occult tarot. The tarot's 22 trumps plus the Fool correspond to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, linking the cards to the Jewish mystical tradition of Kabbalah. Both de Gébelin and de Melay is said that were essentially making up an ancient history for the cards. Modern research has found zero evidence that tarot existed in ancient Egypt, or that it was transmitted by wandering gypsies. In fact, the Romani originated in India and reached Europe long after tarot was born in Italy. And yet, these Enlightenment-era scholars firmly believed their own theories. Despite the lack of proof, which scholars pointed out even then, the romantic notion that tarot cards carried hidden Egyptian teachings was irresistible. Cour de Gébelin's work gave tarot an alluring new identity. What had been a pastime now seemed like a mysterious relic of the ancients. This marked the birth of what we call the occult tarot. As one historian later put it, an entire false history and false interpretation of the tarot was concocted by these occult enthusiasts, and it quickly became almost universally believed. After 1781, people would never look at the tarot deck quite the same way. No one embraced this new idea more energetically than a man named Jean-Baptiste Alliette, better known by his quirky pseudonym Etteilla, which is just his surname reversed. If de Gébelin theorized about tarot's occult significance, Etteilla made it practical. A Parisian occultist and barber by trade, Etteilla was the first professional tarot reader that we know of. In the early 1780s, he took the tarot and ran with it straight into the world of fortune-telling. Etteilla published a series of books from 1783 onward, basically teaching people how to read tarot cards to tell fortunes. He even coined the word cartomancy to describe divination with card. Etteilla went a step further and in 1789 produced the first ever tarot deck designed purely for occult use. This deck wasn't meant for playing games at all. It was stuffed with added astrological symbols, Egyptian motifs, and Etteilla's own interpretations. It was in effect the world's first tarot oracle deck. Among Etteilla's claims was that the tarot contained the wisdom of Egyptian prophet priests. He enforced the idea that it was the Book of Thoth and marketed his deck under that mystical title. Thanks to Etteilla's entrepreneurial zeal, by the end of the 18th century, the practice of tarot reading had been born. What had been an exclusive hypothesis in de Gébelin's learned book became, through Etteilla, a popular occult practice. Parisian fortune tellers started laying out tarot cards in spreads to advise clients on love and money. Etteilla's influence was significant. He founded a society of card interpreters, and his manual systematized meanings for every card, upright and reversed. In other words, he gave the tarot a rulebook for divination. While for decades most people still just played card games with tarot packs, a growing subculture now treated the tarot deck as a sacred key to arcane wisdom. The genie was out of the bottle, or perhaps we should say, the fool had stepped out of the deck and begun his journey into the unknown. The 1790s, French Revolution, and the tumultuous years that followed did not dampen the occult enthusiasm for tarot. If anything, the interest spread and intensified in the 19th century. Paris, London, and other European capitals saw a flourishing of secret societies, mystics, and magicians, many of whom seized upon the tarot as a central symbol system for esoteric knowledge. During the 1800s, the tarot deck was steadily mythologized even further and entangled with various mystical traditions. In France, the successors to Etteilla and de Gébelin were an influential group of occult writers who elaborated on the tarot's true meaning. Foremost among them was Eliphas Levi, a former Catholic deacon turned mystic. He was the first to explicitly marry the tarot with Kabbalah, the Jewish mysticism. Each tarot trump, Levi asserted, corresponds to one of the 22 Hebrew letters, tying the deck to the Sephirot of the Tree of Life. It was Levi who popularized the terms major arcana and minor arcana for the trumps and suits of the tarot. He also gave new names and numbers to some cards, for instance, calling the Hanged Man Prudence at one point and numbering the Fool as 0. Levi was convinced that the tarot embodied a hidden universal knowledge. In fact, he famously wrote that an imprisoned person with no other book than the tarot, if he knew how to use it, could in a few years acquire universal knowledge and would be able to speak on all subjects with unequaled learning. That quote really shows the almost reverent awe Lévy had for the tarot's symbolic power. He literally believed the cards contained the keys to all wisdom, a complete portable library of the mysteries. Little wonder that Lévy's work had huge influence on later occultists, artists, and writers. People like Arthur Conan Doyle and Victor Hugo showed interest in spiritualism and tarot in that era. Lévy himself mentored others and corresponded widely, spreading tarot lore. Following Lévy's lead, a number of other French esoteric writers contributed to tarot's occult lore. Papus, the pen name of Dr. Gérard Ancos, actually published Tarot of the Bohemians in 1889, a book that became a classic in the field. His book further solidified the notion of tarot as a compendium of Hermetic, Egyptian, and Kabbalistic teachings. Meanwhile, Oswald Wirth, a Swiss occultist in Paris, designed one of the first modern esoteric tarot decks in 1889. Wirth's deck was a set of 22 major arcana cards only, each meticulously redrawn with occult symbols and Hebrew letters according to Lévy's principles. Wirth also wrote Tarot of the Magicians, linking tarot imagery to medieval cathedral symbolism and further Kabbalistic interpretations. By the late 19th century, thanks to these figures, the image of the tarot was transformed from its humble beginnings. The cards were now seen as storied emblems of arcane wisdom. A little dramatic, perhaps, since historically the poor things were just playing cards. Yet it's a testament to the human imagination that people found such profound meaning in the tarot's pictures. While France had launched the occult tarot movement, Britain picked up the torch in the late 1800s with its own mystical orders. The most famous of these was the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, founded in 1887. The Golden Dawn, its membership included notable figures such as the poet W.B. Yeats, actress Florence Farr, and many learned men and women fascinated by esoteric arts. In their secret temples, Golden Dawn initiates studied astrology, Kabbalah, angelic magic. And yes, the tarot was central to their teachings. They used tarot cards for scrying, meditation, and ritual. Members were even encouraged to create their own tarot decks by hand as part of their magical training. The order developed an elaborate system of tarot correspondences, blending Egyptian gods, Hebrew letters, alchemical symbols onto the cards. It's from the Golden Dawn that two of the most famous tarot decks of all time emerged in the early 20th century. One was the brainchild of Arthur Edward Waite, a scholarly mystic and Golden Dawn member, and Pamela Coleman Smith, an artist and fellow member. In 1909, they produced what's now known as the Rider-Waite-Smith. This deck revolutionized tarot art. Prior to this, the pipe cards, the 1 through 10 of each suit in decks like the Tarot de Marseille, had simple arrangements of symbols. Pamela Coleman Smith's genius was to illustrate every card with a full scene. So the 7 of Cups shows a person gazing at 7 visionary images in floating cups. The 5 of Pentacles depicts destitute figures in snow outside a church window, and so on. These rich illustrations made the tarot much more accessible and story-driven, especially for beginners learning to read the cards. The RWS deck quickly became the most popular tarot deck in the English-speaking world and remains so to this day. Another legendary deck was created by Aleister Crowley, perhaps the most controversial occultist of the era. Crowley had been a Golden Dawn member too. In the late 1930s, he embarked on designing his own ultimate tarot with the help of artist Lady Frida Harris. The result was the Thoth Tarot, a deck more modern, with artwork infused with Crowley's Thelemic philosophy, astrological and Kabbalistic symbols, and numerous changes to traditional tarot structure. Before we move on from the early 20th century, we should mention an American contribution to tarot's development, Paul Foster Case. Case was a notable occultist in the US who first encountered tarot around 1900 in New York. He'd been a talented musician, but his life took a dramatic turn into mysticism. There's a captivating story he told. In 1909, while walking in Chicago, Paul Case was approached by a stranger who greeted him by name. Dr. Flood, the stranger called himself, and delivered a cryptic message. This mysterious Dr. Flood, possibly a pseudonym referencing a famous alchemist, informed Case that he had a choice to make: continue his successful music career or devote himself to serving humanity through the study of the occult. It was like a scene out of a movie. A guru appears and gives the hero a quest. Inspired, Case chose the occult path. He dove headlong into the study of tarot and Kabbalistic symbolism. By 1922, Paul Foster Case founded his own mystery school, which focused heavily on tarot in its curriculum. Case created a tarot deck for his order, essentially a simplified black and white version of the Rider-Waite cards, which students would color themselves as a learning exercise. He felt the existing decks had some symbolic errors, so he corrected them. Case wrote extensively on the tarot's deeper meanings, publishing books and lessons that helped demystify the cards for earnest students. One of his well-known works is The Tarot, A Key to the Wisdom of the Ages, 1947. Paul Foster Case may not be as famous as Waite or Crowley globally, but he is highly respected among tarot scholars for his clear and profound teaching. When I started to study tarot for me, personally, his teaching was the best. Anyway, everyone chooses what they think is best for them in the end as their learning material. Fast forward to the mid-20th century and beyond, and you'll find that tarot cards had completed their journey from exclusive occult circles into wider popular culture. The 1960s and 70s in particular saw an explosion of interest in tarot, in parallel with the New Age movement. Academics and psychologists also gave the tarot a nod of interest. The famous psychologist Carl Jung notably described the cards as representing archetypes of human experience. He saw tarot images as doorways to the collective unconscious. Tarot thus gained a sort of psychological validation as a tool for self-exploration. The result? Tarot has never been more popular than it is today. By the 21st century, there are thousands of different tarot decks in circulation. There are decks based on every theme you can imagine: mythology, literature, movies, cultural motifs, you name it. What's especially interesting is that the stigma that may have once surrounded tarot, the old "it's evil" or superstitious nonsense, has largely fallen away. In the end, the tarot's greatest secret might be that its story is still unfolding, written as it has always been by the people who use it.